Well, the latest news poll out this morning shows voters have had enough, and Anthony Albanese could be turfed out after just one term in power. Joining us live now is the Shadow Finance Minister Jane Hume. Joan, the coalition though, good morning by the way, the coalition isn't exactly cruising to victory either, because there's still that primary vote that's under 40 at this stage. So, I mean, that means a minority government is the most likely scenario. If so, does that mean chaos for the next 3 years, and therefore the people are poorer for it?
Pete, there is no doubt that a minority government would be the worst possible outcome, and it will be no surprise to you when I say, as I do most weeks, that the only poll that matters to the coalition is the one on election day. But what I can say is that these number of polls are pointing to the fact that people have had enough of being poorer under Labor. They've seen their standard of living go backwards by 8.7% in the last 3 years. While inflation has cumulatively gone up by 11%, their living standards have gone up even further. Their cost of living has gone up even further, 19.4%. So people are really feeling that pain, and the only solution that the government has had is to spend more. That has made the problem worse. This is a government that is clearly out of ideas, they're out of excuses, and soon they'll be out of time.
Right. I mean, contrary to that, though, unemployment's still down, inflation is tracking down, wages is above inflation. I mean, so you can cherry pick different parts, can't you?
Well, you might say that, but in fact, unemployment is higher than it was when Labor came to office. Inflation has come down, certainly, but the average inflation rate under a coalition government was 2.2%. It's been more than 4.4% under a Labor government. Economic growth has stagnated. We're now growing at about 0.8% per annum, and we're in a per capita recession, the longest per capita recession on record. So I don't think that there's a particularly rosy outlook out there, and Australians certainly out there celebrating in the streets because they're doing so well. The last 3 years have been really tough for a lot of Australians, and they've told the Albanese government that they've had enough.
If the RBA delivers a rate cut tomorrow, is that a political gift for Labor?
Well, it'll be absolutely, a blessing for those Australians that have been paying off their mortgages, around $50,000 more on the average Australian's mortgage in the last 3 years. That's $50,000 that Australian families are never going to get back. And the reason why their mortgage has cost them more is because interest rates have stayed too high for too long. The reason why they've stayed too high for too long is because the government has been working against the RBA rather than with the RBA. When governments keep spending, it's like having their foot on the accelerator. The RBA has been trying to put its foot on the brake. We were the only developed country in the world last year that didn't have a cut to its interest rates, and that's because the government has been working against fiscal policy has been working against monetary policy rather than with it. If there is a rate cut this week, and I won't preempt the RBA's decision, I have no intention of muscling in on the independent RBA the way that the Labor government has. But should there be a rate cut tomorrow, it will be a relief for families, but will it be too little too late for those that have fallen so far behind?
But this is such a politically charged RBA meeting, this one, for obvious reasons. I can't recall quite a countdown like this one for some time, given that there's an election around the corner. I mean, the politics are, though, it helps Albanese, does it not, if he gets a cut weeks, months before an election? Which is probably why we've seen the Labor government muscle up and get a little heavy with the RBA, trying to verbal them a little bit over the last few months. Well, Jim Chalmers is saying this morning for everybody to stay quiet, not to.
Yes, that's exactly right, because he's realised that it hasn't worked well for him in the past. In fact, now we're going to see a change of the RBA board in the April meeting. I'm not entirely sure what the implications of that might be, but so frustrated has Jim Chalmers been with the RBA that he's messed around with the board. OK. By the same token, just keeping that argument going, if the RBA holds, is that a gift for you? We're not looking for the RBA to do one thing or the other. What we're looking is for government to do its fair share of the heavy lifting, and that's exactly what a coalition government will do.
Well, okay.
By making sure that we bring our fiscal rules under control, we will lower inflation and do our fair share of the heavy lifting to keep the inflation challenge in check.